Hello, everybody, and welcome to Blurring the Lines, presented and supported by Australians in Film. My name is Jeffrey Walker. I'm a film and television director based between Australia and the US, and I started this project as a way to share with you all some of my favorite people to collaborate with. Each episode will feature an exceptionally talented creative who I've worked with and I love working with, but also a person that I adore as well, just for their spirit. So if there were a dream guest for this show to begin it all with, it would be this man. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to a very dear friend, super talent, head of the family, Ty Burrell. How are you?
Hi, pal. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be looking at you.
I'm so glad to be looking at you. When do you start with the super talented creatives?
You're just going to introduce them.
Great.
And then if you can quickly mute yourself and move off the video stream.
Well, I don't have to because I'm quarantined with all of them.
Oh, how
Yeah,
about that?
yeah.
You all got together.
Myself with people that are more talented than I am.
Imagine if under these circumstances, they put all of the talented people in one place and just said, we can't risk you going out and doing anything.
Yeah. And Ty will get you your food.
That's the least you could do. Now, along the way, as I ask Ty questions, if you are watching and you'd like to send a little question through to Ty, we might have some time to get to those at the end as well. The first thing that I want to do is just introduce my connection to you, Ty. Like, why on earth would you be talking to me today? And the reason is that for the last 7 years, I've been working with Ty on Modern Family, and I come and join him for anywhere between about 8 and 16 days a year. So it's a brief little moment, but because it's so much fun and it's such a heightened experience, it's like I've often described it that you guys are all in suspended animation while I leave, and then when I come back, you just hit the ground running and you pick it all up again.
Well, it was always the 8 to 16 best days of our year. We were, as you know, not just one of my favorites, but everybody's favorites. And everybody should know that in our last season, we everybody got together and voted on who should come back, and Jeff was at the top of that list. And it was
Well,
really fun.
well, thank you so much. I mean, that means a huge amount because as I followed the series across the course of the years, and I don't know if everyone knows, but you have a lot of directors that rotate through television shows, and the pool did get smaller as the years went on, and they were quite internal. So it might be a writer, or it could be a first assistant director who was directing. And so each year I would keep my fingers crossed and call Jeff Morton, the producer, and see if I could if I do it. So and I've told you this privately, but I'd like it to be reflected on the record that not only I would say you one of the most, because I don't want to be rude to the other guests that are going to come on, but one of the most talented actors I've ever come across, comedic or otherwise. You're also a really beautiful person, very kind person, and I'm thrilled that you're kicking this show off for us. So
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. The feeling's very mutual, truly.
Now, I was going to start by asking you or talking to you about the fact that this year would have been particularly the first quarter of this year, under any circumstances, would have been a very emotional time for you, in the fact that you've had 11 years on a show that I assume would make up an extremely formative decade of your life on Modern Family. And you knew probably a year or so out that you were building toward the end of this massive journey, which all played out at the end of February and that kind of time. And then coupled with that has been this once in a century pandemic that followed it like a fortnight later, And I just wondered, how has the start of the year been, and has it been a roller coaster? How has it been to navigate?
And I think you probably have some of these feelings as well, because we kind of went through some of that last season together and rap and everything, but it feels like a little bit of a hallucination at this point. Like it's such a miracle that we wrapped the show. First of all, we got everything finished, I think, basically 2 weeks before everything shut down. So I think to me, the show operates as like a miracle, multiple miracles. It's a miracle that that a sitcom like that on network television was lucky enough to sort of be on the air and do well when that was sort of dying off a little bit, and then to have somehow have come past the finish line before all of this. I think that, gratitude is sort of the prevailing feeling. If it crosses my mind, it's usually like I feel so lucky that we were able to have this experience uninterrupted. Could very easily have been a situation where we didn't get to the finale. But that's also, that's sort of the upside. The downside is that it was going to be melancholy, and there was going to be some sadness of not going to work with your friends, and it's compounded by not being able to be anywhere near friends.
Yeah. You go from like an extremely close environment to absolutely nothing. It's like, it was always, I assume, going to be a fairly abrupt end, physically, literally, emotionally. But then to couple that with the fact that you can't see any of these people.
I feel like we're the ultimate pre-COVID show in many ways, and one of them is that literally the last scene we ever filmed is 13 people holding each other in a circle.
I felt so stressed watching that, knowing what we know now.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah. Don't touch each other. It's strange. It's strange. We're keeping in touch through, text chains, and people are staying connected through their, mutual experiences, that everybody's having through this brave new world. But yeah, there's a little bit of like an extra distance felt, I think.
And you were priming yourself to make a bigger move back to Salt Lake City as well at the end of the show, which has been paused as well. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. You and I have spent time in Utah together, haven't we?
Love it.
Love it.
I love it.
It's a
I even got on Zillow after we were hanging out up there. I
remember that.
Oh, yeah. I'm easily sold on that stuff. If I go on holiday anywhere, I'm like, I better have a look in the real estate window and just check it.
I think your and my problem is more about Zillow than it is locations.
Right.
It's really just it's an issue with wanting to be on real estate apps.
Oh, yeah. That's like the hobby in Australia. Everyone has, like, there's something like, I think that realestate.com in Australia has maybe like 3 million people of the 22 million people who live here just go on and have a look at it.
I almost did an endorsement for realestate.com in the middle of our run on Modern Family, but it was a conflict of interest.
It was. But you talk of blurring the lines. I mean, you can't, you mess. Now, can I ask you this too, is that where I've hung out with you before up in Utah is at one of your bars, and you own a few bars. And I assume that part of the stress that was attacking us from every angle would have been the fact that did they all have to shut down in this time, or what?
Yeah. The bars and restaurants in Utah had to shut down for a couple of reasons. Most of them were for COVID, but some of them were closed down because of a series of earthquakes. And in addition to that, the liquor laws in Utah can be a little bit arcane. So they're in a uniquely tough spot. I mean, the small businesses in Salt Lake and all around Utah, they're in a really tough spot, and our businesses are no different. We're unsure of whether or not we'll make it through this, like most. Have to just sort of wait and see how long it lasts. I think if, I heard somewhere that 1 in 4 businesses will be, shuttered permanently.
Lucky you only own 3 bars then.
Yeah. That's not going to be
fine. They can have it to someone else. They can have 1 out of 1 of theirs go. But it motivated you to start an initiative, Tip Your Server. And do you mind chatting to us about that?
No, not at all. My wife and I and the mayor of Salt Lake City, Aaron Mendenhall, and a lovely group called the Downtown Alliance, which is a nonprofit there, teamed up to raise money for all the unemployed bar and restaurant workers. And it has been incredibly rewarding, but very challenging. It's a hard time to raise money. We're a little over 600,000 raised for, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 employees. So you can tell how far we've got to go, but we're trying to we've been sending out checks for $500 each to as many employees as we can as we raise money to hopefully help with groceries or, you know, some immediate needs. And if anybody has the means, please go to downtownslc.org, and you can follow the pop-up windows there. Salt Lake is in an unusual situation, so that's kind of why we're making a broader ask about it. But thank you for asking.
It's amazing. I found it, just so that you know too, I did tip your server Ty, just TY in Google, and I found it straight away as well. And because, as you were saying before, Brooke and I have had a blast in Salt Lake City, and similarly in Australia, there is a group of workers that have completely fallen through the cracks of support because they're contracted in a weird way. It affects the film industry, it affects casuals, it affects musicians, it affects artists. And they're not sitting on a nest egg. There is no real cushion. The cushion gets absorbed by other things. And Brooke and I were happy to donate too, because we've had such a blast there before.
Oh, wow.
So,
Thank
you. I've never tipped in Salt Lake City, so it's about time.
You've still got more to go, is what you're saying.
That's a good more to go.
Thank you.
But no, it's a wonderful initiative, and I think it sort of also puts a big flag on what the bigger issue is around.
Yeah. And I really hope that in all the communities, we're kind of keeping them in our mind, as you said, that the unemployment's tricky for servers. There's rarely benefits. So I hope it's raising awareness all around.
I have no doubt that it is. Just with your bars, and one thing that I've always loved chatting to you about them is that you are fully entrenched in a massive family network, and that's how you run them. Mm-hmm. Is that one of the appeals, or is it one of the things that drives you crazy?
You know, it's one of the appeals. You know, the old saying of don't go into business with your family was, you know, there are moments when you're like, okay, this is complicated. And maybe you'd rather do this with somebody you could just sever ties with.
Yeah. But
for the most part, it's been really great. I don't know if you guys have this term, shirt tail relative. I think it's an Appalachian term possibly, but it just means people you're related to, but you can't, it's hard to explain, and you'd have to go, you know, like basically go through a whole lineage. That's everybody involved in our bars are shirt tail relatives.
Wonderful.
You know, in-laws of a cousin or something like that. And it's mostly been really fun and rewarding. Granted, I show up and just take credit for other people's hard work. So when I've said how fun it is, and my brother's been in my presence, you might
have a lack of awareness as to how they talk about you when you're not on the You're like, it's so much fun.
I think I have a lack of awareness in general, but yes.
Right.
I actually did that once. I was the first time I really got a sense for that was I brought my brother to an event, and somebody asked me what it was like to own bars, and I said it's a blast. And my brother was just off of my shoulder, and I could feel
the heat.
My head get warm.
But I think the idea of, I think that the idea of being able to be in business with your family, like I love Brooke's family where we are here in Brisbane. I love my family down in Melbourne, and I'm a sucker for that. I think the idea of being able to kind of stay connected for that reason is a really good thing.
You know, you've always been a person who just deeply loves family. I've always admired that about you. You and your immediate family and extended family. It's something you've, from the first time we met, I knew that about you. I think it's a really cool quality.
Well, after our third child that came out in fairly rapid succession to the brothers, someone eventually said to me, "Stop breeding. That is enough. That's just dial it all down." And Brooke's like, "Should we have another kid?" I'm like, "Yeah." I sound like, you know, when you're talking about, you know, how great being in working at the bar is, I'm like, yeah, have more kids. I don't care. It's a piece of cake. Wonderful. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to start this show was because I love the collaborative nature of filmmaking. It's sort of, and I'm not a collaborator by choice. It's absolutely essential for me to have any success, you know, in my career. I'm going to be leaning, you know, very, very heavily on talented people. And I observed one collaboration on set with you that was something that I looked forward to every time that I joined, and this combination happened to line up. And that was with co-creator Chris Lloyd and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if you could talk to me about how you guys fell in step with each other so well, and what Chris's kind of guiding hand over the project, and you know, how that sort of shaped the show that we all love so much, and also what you got out of that collaboration.
Yeah. If people don't know Chris, he also ran Frasier for 11 years. So the 5 Emmys that Modern Family got only matched his run on Frasier. So he is a legend in writers' circles. And I don't know if he would see himself in this vein, but I think a lot of people, you know, look up to his writing. But I also, you know, view him as a type of a mentor, because we've worked on 2 other shows before this. I've been working with him since I was in my early 30s, which is,
I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
And Chris is someone who, while having strong opinions and really like being sort of a master storyteller, loves to laugh. You know this about him. He is somebody who is very serious, and some people can be intimidated by him. But when you're in the rhythm of a show, all Chris cares about is laughing, is having laughs, and those laughs translate to the screen. And so what those days are like, as you know, is you get to work and you start doing bits off screen about something. Who knows what? It could be a bit that's carried over from the last episode. It could be a bit that's been running for. He had a cream cheese bit for breakfast for when you first get there. He'd always have cream cheese somewhere on his face for all 11 years of the show. The first day you saw him on set, he would have cream cheese somewhere. But then,
can I just tell you too, there was one thing that I remember very well, was that we were shooting in a school once, and you had your character had a foray into adult learning or teaching, and Chris was positioned somewhere where there was a projector above his head in the classroom, and there was a sign that was in big, bold font type about turning off the projector when you leave the room. And he did one of the funniest bits about that, and you were sort of someone in the room, I think, feeding him, going, why did that happen? That's because we didn't turn off the light globe, team.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You're wondering why we don't have little get-togethers anymore?
How much larger can I make this font?
Yeah. And there was something so beautiful. It showed that, like, the amount of hard work that goes into making a show like Modern Family, and don't assume, anyone who's listening, that after 10 years or 11 years it gets easier. It's a really, really hard thing to keep a show a hit and to keep it going successfully. But the lightness of voice that Chris brought, I think, and he was someone I was instantly sort of drawn to, and he's quite a quiet fellow, very humble. He doesn't appear in all the behind the scenes and stuff as well. I've noticed he's quite private about all of that. But he's also like a comedy scientist a bit.
Absolutely. He's to me, it's a little bit like Beautiful Mind levels of how he can keep a story in his head. I'm sure you've had that experience before too, but when you're sort of like, there may be some moment that's happening where you're on the steps and you're making a reference, and you're like, wait, did we already refer to this? Like, are we getting ahead of ourselves or behind ourselves? And he's somebody who can go through the whole story in his head and basically tell you how, and you know, the way the show was written, it's 3 stories doing this every week, and he can basically tell you how each of those things kind of fit together. And he's also really connected into how those things add up emotionally, so that that matters in the story. With those bits though, and I know you notice this, they often, and this I would say is true of the whole writing staff of Steve and all the writers, is that the bits that happen off screen, they often ended up making their way on screen.
That's gold. I didn't know that. That's so funny.
Well, in some ways, it's often because you're maybe even just spinning off on something you're working on. And I'm sure you've been there for that too. It's almost like a version of doing an alt. But you're just back by the director's chairs and you're spinning ideas and stuff. But I will miss that. Honestly, I will miss that as much or more than anything, that part of the process.
I think that what happens, everyone has seen what happens between action and cut, but what happens around it is very special. I will also say, because there's lots of actors watching this as well, Ty, because of the connection to Australian film, and you guys all hang out by the monitors. You're all there all the time. You're such, like when you don't retreat and come back. You always come, you're always around, and it does create a greater sort of sense of camaraderie and fun, and the conversations are very funny and light, and then you roll into set and do it. Whereas that's not the case on all shows. It's you felt like a company, an ensemble, and Steve Levitan's the same, is that he's very funny and engages on a level like the show will be okay, it'll happen over there, but let's connect as humans over here for a little while.
And I think that the writers, starting at the top, but the entire writing staff always welcomed us into that part of the process. Not all of our pitches were great, and many of them were terrible, but it was always a welcome thing to come back and pitch. Come back behind the monitors and pitch and hang.
But their level of respect for you guys was through the roof. And there's so many writers. Like, how many would be 15 or so? I mean, but they adore you guys, and they write for you guys, and they try to challenge and push you guys as well. And I thought that was very special. Now, I just want to talk a little about your castmates as well. You referred to there's a really beautiful end of the show behind the scenes that came out as almost a companion piece to the final episode. And you talked about working with Julie, as that your hope had been that you'd been a great scene partner for her. Mm-hmm. What does that mean exactly?
I think that what you're hoping to be for somebody else, this is just my opinion, and I hope I was for her, and I know she was for me, is just somebody who is, prepared and ready to go wherever things go. And we're all a little bit vulnerable and sensitive, but as secure as possible in that process, and trying to be as least defensive about, and we really didn't give each other notes. It was more about, getting notes from you or from writers or whatever. But if somebody has an idea, about trying your best to go with it, and to being prepared enough to go with it. And she was always that. She was always that. She was always, unless there was a really good reason that really did step on something important to the Claire storyline, which she was very good about knowing, where that was. She's just game. She's game. She's tough, and she's game. And I mean tough in the best way. Like, she's just up for it. And that was incredible, and I mean, I've been lucky to work with a lot of wonderful people, but I've also, like all of us, have worked with, oh my gosh, we're filming in a biplane.
I love it.
A World War II biplane.
That's perfect. I think it's cute that you live in a biplane. It's kind of
a neighbor. There's a neighbor.
You can't control that. It sounds fine. I can hear every word. You're fine.
you know, like all of us, I have worked with people who were less secure or maybe not willing to go down the road with some ideas, and not just, and I don't mean mine. I mean like the ideas from writers or directors, and that always feels tough. You know, it makes your days longer. But it was just always a pleasure going to work with Julie.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this. I'm gonna share some of my observations of the cast, and I love them all. So there's nothing controversial going to be thrown out here. But you can tell me if you agree, disagree, or you'd like to add or change.
Great.
And I'm going to leave you to last.
Okay.
So if I say Julie, I agree with everything that you said. And also I can't stress how smart she is as well.
Totally.
Her brain works a little bit quicker and a little bit cleverer than most. And I think what's unique about her as a performer is that her timing is her timing. No one else does what Julie does, you know, she comes in quicker. And I'm, even as an audience and a fan, I'm laughing like a little bit later than, I can't keep up with how fast she is. And I'm thrilled by that as an audience.
Yeah.
That would be the only addition I'd give.
I would agree with that. And I would just like, to your point, I think that we're lucky that we have Julie as an actor, because she really could have done anything.
Right.
Like, she is somebody who could be a senator or an attorney, or, I mean, there is no occupation that her brain and wit would not be capable of.
That's true. She's just channeled her intellect to the show for the last however long. But you're absolutely right. And she also directed the show very beautifully as well. Multiple times. So, you know, she's wonderful. Okay. Next, I'm going to say, so Jesse. I think Jesse is super prepared. He almost brings his theatre chops to the set in terms of his preparation, always knows it. I think that he's also he's a gentleman and quite quiet on set, and gives everything he can to try to make particularly the relationship that he plays with Cam the most grounding and the most truth and the most humor that he can. And he works fairly relentlessly at all that.
I would agree with all of that. I would add to that Jesse has the highest quantity and quality of bits of anybody I've ever known in my life. And he's got one for every occasion, and they're all funny. Some of them I can't say on camera. One of them is called "What Am I Pooping?" And it's just him standing with an object behind him, and then it falls out from behind him. But
it's the game show America needs right now.
It really is. It's going to get us through this crisis.
I'll say of Eric that I think that because the character he plays, Cam, gets so sort of worked up about things, Eric kind of gets himself all worked up about things. And then he's so spontaneous and in the scene, and he feels like, I reckon that some of the great discoveries that he makes happen almost while you're shooting it, as opposed to that he turns up, I've got this linear way that it's going to play out or whatever. And I think that the chaos of the set and how it's all going, he just feeds into Cam's, not hysteria, but, you know, that kind of energy. And therefore, he's quite a large presence on set in an energy sense. And he's not necessarily like that when you're just hanging out with him, but he seems to funnel all of that into the Cam that we love and know.
Absolutely. I would say, like, it was always a blast to see him find stuff in the moment, to find beats in the moment, to your point. And I would also say that Eric was like the true prankster on our show. He was the one person who you could kind of count on to sort of come up with some prank to keep everybody on their toes. He's still doing that even via text. So he is always entertaining.
Okay. Sofia Vergara, I say this. Her takes are either perfect or unusable. There is nothing in between.
So well put. That's really
And what I'm saying about the unusable is
I know
that I've
exactly
heard her say, because she's obviously, she speaks, a bunch of languages. I remember one time, the crew was sort of laughing because she'd stumbled over an English thing, and she said, "You try and be funny in another language."
Yeah. Yes.
And everyone sort of laughed and understood. But I would say that's her range.
I think that is an incredibly astute way of putting it, because when she would get a take wrong, it wouldn't be like, and that's why we always drive the car. It would be like, and there's the plant in the house oven mitt. Like, she literally would just say gibberish, because
and she would make herself laugh in the middle of that sentence because she knew how badly it was coming out.
Yeah. I would also say that her persona belies what a natural talent she is. Like, she's playing somebody kind of big and brash, but if you have been at table reads with her, I honestly don't think she ever had a table read where every joke didn't get its best shot. She had such a knack for knowing where the joke was after having read the script once or twice. And that is to me, that's a huge sign of real talent.
Yes.
Is just knowing right where the joke is. And she hit it every time. She had the luxury of reading it, so she wasn't having to memorize different language.
Yeah.
But I was always just blown away by that.
Yeah. And she was such a great casting choice from the outset. It's just, she's a gift to the show. Ed, I'm going to say this. Ed, the observations I have of him were that his nurturing quality of Rico and of Sophia and protecting their performance was probably the most generous thing I've seen any actor do on any set ever.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because he would not stop until he felt like they really understood, either if it was a cadence thing, it could be a language thing, or how that joke's got to land because of this or that. And that's after 11 years. He never sort of threw his hands up, and, he would just, and I heard Rico talk about it in that farewell documentary too, of just how much he felt like Ed was going to be the constant. He can have different directors come in, different writers come in, but if Ed gave him that nod, he knew he'd got it. And if it needed a little work, he would help it.
And you saw the way he did it too. He always did it in a way that was really loving and
so loving and gentle
and never domineering. And both of them loved him for it.
Yeah.
They would look to him in the middle of a scene. Sophia would go like, did I get that word right? Is that word? Should I hit that word? And he'd go, no, hit the next word. And I would add to that's coming from one of the great comic actors of all time, and it is a crime that he never won an Emmy for that performance, because nobody could be more subtle or throw away a joke better than Ed O'Neill.
And also, what we had grown to know of Ed is that, like Married with Children, much broader show, and then he slid into Modern Family, and he was like, oh yeah, I know that boomer. I know that guy. He's so understated and, sort of knows it all. I'm not going to keep that one a bit quiet, but I'm also not going to have a filter on that. And I just, from episode 1, boy, he just clicked with what the tone of this thing was,
Yeah, he was amazing.
And the other thing that I'll say is that his years on set have given him a great understanding of being able to manage the marathon that is being on set for 20 years. One thing that I remember you sharing some of these with us, and we all had a laugh. One of them was, he's got a little list of rules. Things like, why stand if you can sit in a scene? Why sit if you can lay down?
Why lay down if you can be off screen?
The other one that I love is that if there's a baby in the scene, hold the baby. Baby goes home in 2 hours. Boom.
Hold the baby. Hold the Baby is a whole chapter in this fictional book we wrote about Ed's techniques for television acting. Never ever eat real food on a set. You're always having your last bite and then you pretend to eat it. If your dialogue is over, leave the scene and then make them say you have to come back. He would always just he'd finish his dialogue and there'd be 2 pages left, and he would just be like on the table like, all right, and then head off. But the all-time great Ed chapter in this book of acting efficiency for the camera is there any reason this scene can't be in a car? Which is, if it's just two people talking, he would go like, why can't this be in a car? And in a car, there's no blocking. I don't have to wear pants. We, you know,
the director can barely communicate with you. It's got all the good things.
I can have coffee right beneath the screen.
Oh, it is.
I've got my sides right there. He loved being in a car. Loved it.
I wish I'd known that. I would have put more of those things in
there. Yeah.
And my last observations of you, and I just have a little question about your preparation too, but you, to me, of the team, came in the most comedically prepared for where you wanted Phil to be in that scene, and that you lent into his obliviousness in a world-class comedy-defining way, which I just, has made me laugh from before I joined the show, up until as recently as watching the final episode. Your level of preparation, not to say that you won't react and live in the moment as well, but are you a slave to that prep at home, or when does that process happen for you?
Yeah, I loved preparing. I loved it, and I loved trying to come up with alts. And I actually would take this opportunity to thank Fred Willard, who just passed away. And Fred, I worked on a show before Modern Family, and in many ways, I was always driven by fear more than I was driven by confidence. So my preparation is about trying not to look like an idiot on screen. And I worked with Fred, and I was in the dressing room above him, and I had a shared event, and I could hear him working and working and working stuff. And Fred is somebody who we know is famous for his improv, but I heard him working over and over and over on lines, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is part of how he makes things look so easy. And then he would rehearse his alts. I heard him rehearse his alts, which came out as improvs. But he was putting time in to think of what would be the funniest thing he could throw in on some of those things. And I really, he is the most influential actor in my life. And I'm like everybody, I'll miss him dearly. But the sense of being prepared and coming with alts and other ideas is driven by fear and Fred Willard.
How beautiful. I was actually nervous to bring up Fred because I know how, your special connection to him, and that you saw him as a mentor and a model, but we also had a great time working with him as well. And so, and he did an episode quite recently on the show. It was just that you knew that you were working on one of what would be one of his last few projects. And yes. So anyway, but I really felt for you as well when I heard the news of Fred, and for everybody who loves and cares for him, has worked with him and his family.
Yeah, so the whole world will miss Fred, but luckily we've got just so much. Fred was prolific.
Yeah. And good in everything.
And good
in everything.
Everything he was in. My kids just reminded me that he was the only human in WALL-E, which I forgot.
He is the only human in WALL-E.
I think so.
Now, speaking of WALL-E, you've done a little bit with Pixar, so your voice plays on a loop in my house. You're always on something, whether it's. Did you enjoy? I know you're working with Amy Poehler. Duncanville is a new series that you're a part of as well. Amy had such a blast working with Pixar, and did you feel the same? Was that a joyous experience playing Bailey? Yeah, really, really wonderful. I mean, totally different than anything I'd ever done, even other animation, because their process is just so unique. Amy said it was the quality control is just like second to none with Pixar. Unbelievable. No story beat gets to animation even without having gone through everybody at Pixar. And normally I would say that's a recipe for, making something a non-idea, is to run it through too many people. But they only hire, the only people that are there are hyper creative. And all they do is catch little things that somebody else might have missed. That was my experience anyway. The way they do it,
is that they get through to the end of a thing and somebody's like, I don't know that this adds up. And then they go back and they even retooled, like they were a year in and they retooled almost the whole thing. They were like, we're going back. It just didn't add up, and we're not gonna, we're not just gonna go down this road because we started down this road. It's gonna be great, or it's gonna be nothing. That was amazing, incredible.
Oh, I'm so glad. And when I saw you, I think you were promoting that in Sydney, and the reason that you'd flown halfway around the world to promote it is just because you loved that film, and filmmakers love their films. Like it doesn't matter. I watched Toy Story 1. You can imagine what they'd be battling with the technological issues of being the first to make an animation in that way. And the story is so sublime, so perfect.
It is. Yeah.
So well crafted.
Yeah.
Ty, I'm going to go to a couple of questions, if you don't mind, from the people who have kindly tuned in. God knows why, but they've tuned in to have a listen to us. Prattle on. Okay, Ty, can you remember the casting process? And did you do a lot of chemistry reads? Oh, just scrolled out. Did you do a lot of chemistry reads, or were you all cast as an ensemble individually?
My casting process was a little bit different from everyone else because Steve McPherson, who ran ABC at the time, did not like me as an actor.
Impossible.
And I had to audition, I think, somewhere around five times for the show. So I was...
And that's unusual, isn't it? At any stage of your career, you wouldn't have tested.
Yeah, usually three would be sort of the max. But luckily for me, the people that surround me and Chris and Steve, who wrote the part for me, whatever that means, they fought very hard, and they said, well, just look at him one more time. And with the mounting pressure, I also gave some pretty bad auditions in there. Right. But then Steve Levitan said, let's film this, because I won't bore you with the way that screen tests are done for television, but it's super antiquated. It's not a normal screen test when you think of being on a camera on a set for a single cam. You're actually in a little theater, and it makes no sense. I wish it would never happen again for any single camera comedy. But he basically said, let's film this. So we went to his backyard, and with Jason Weiner and Sarah Hyland, who had not been cast. Yeah. And then another young actor who was playing Luke, and we improvised and spent basically the afternoon filming a few scenes. Actually, we spent a whole day. And that was finally the thing that got me the job.
And did you feel that you had fallen into a groove on that day as well, that it clicked for you being outside of that audition?
Yes. Yes. That's a really good question. Yes, it was. I hadn't fully felt the character, I don't think, until that day. It was improvising that day that really got me to understand that weird combination of being a kind of almost cocky and humble at the same time. But that was sort of the day.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. It's as good as a scene that would be in the show shot in that backyard. I think it's one of the great little tests, and I'm sure it's also a great for showrunners out there and so on if they're passionate about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for sure I don't know if it's the same in Australia, but here there are a lot of screen tests for single camera shows that take place in a little theater that you do a live performance for, which is bizarre, but absolutely take a camera. If you think there's somebody who's not translating there, take a camera and get them on a 10-year show. Okay, I've got another one for you now from Isabel. And this is one that I'm curious about as well. And it's going to sound like I made this question up, but it's here. What specific... Why doesn't Jeffrey Walker work more? Can you get Jeffrey as part of your overall deal at Disney? A little specific. All right. Well, it's good to have it on the record. I'll ask it. I didn't write. So what specific things do your favorite directors do versus not so good directors you've worked with? Or what do you connect with in a director, I guess? And you've worked with like dozens and dozens on Modern Family alone, let alone everything that you've done prior. Well, this gives me an opportunity to compliment you, which I'm very happy to do. I would say that much like most theater directors do, the more Socratic the process, the better. You know, the more it's a sort of, we're all asking questions. Everybody's sort of, this is the process that I like. You know, if everybody's treating each other with respect, I love when it's basically like, here's a thing we're trying to solve. What's our best way to do it? You know, you would ask a question and then we'd think about it and then go like, well, maybe, or is it that? And then the writers would say, maybe it's that. And then there'd be some idea that would come up there. And if it's about performance too, about like, you know, I think actually the tone this should be more direct, because, you know, the way that this story plays out, he needs to be direct right here. And then you go in and do it. And it was just a delight. You know, I never enjoyed being sort of told, you know, do it this way, and without sort of the understanding the bones of it. You know, it always felt a little bit empty to me when I would do it. And I've done it many times, you know, because largely I'm a people pleaser, but it never feels great. It always feels great. Or even if it's not quite that Socratic, like even just the idea of let's try some different stuff. Like, if sometimes we're all stumped, right? Like everybody's stumped on something. It just doesn't feel right for some reason. You just feel like you never got whatever it was you were after. And so you just sort of like, let's just try some different things, try some different attitudes. And that's always fun too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm very glad to hear all that, because I would say that I have kind of modeled that that I think it's important to be a nice person on set and to be able to be, you know, respectful of that process and respectful of the people that you're working with. I'm going to ask you one last question before we all wind up. But do you think it's important to navigate this industry to be nice? Can you do it? Do you need to have that drive in you and be a little bit of an asshole sometimes, or do you think that you can navigate this thing and be you know, and be warm and respectful and gentle and those sort of things? What you would have seen so many actors, and everyone's got a different approach. You're such an affable, friendly, people-pleasing person. Has that been an important part of your career, do you think?
I think the short answer is yes. I mean, I hope that that's true about me. I think that there is a feeling, and I think in a really pragmatic way, and I think this absolutely applies to you and your career, and it 100% applies to us seeing you for so many seasons on the show. In a really pragmatic way, when you're as lovely as you were to everybody around you, you engender a good spirit. And when it's coupled with talent, like your talent, then it just makes it a no-brainer. If it's an apples and oranges thing, this is just a totally pragmatic thing. If it's an apples and oranges thing, somebody who's lovely to be around and easy to be around, and the talent, and if there's, you know, if the talent is apples and oranges, that's the way you go. I mean, that's just the way it goes, I think. I do think that, and I also would just say that I have just also been very lucky in my career to have gotten the jobs that I got. But I do think there's sometimes a misconception, this is based on my good fortune, about having to be hard driving in our business, about trying to make, in terms of connections and some of the cutthroat quality that you get out in Los Angeles. To me, in my experience and things that I feel like I've observed, if you are just giving your absolute best effort, you are doing your best work, you're putting quality out, you're not settling for anything but your best work. And obviously, if you're, you know, if you have some talent, and if you are kind to people like that, I've found that that creates work. You know, I don't know if you feel the same way.
I
But
do. I do, because I know for a fact that there was a period of time in my career where I was getting work purely based on references and
yeah,
not the work that I'd just done. And I think that I think the gratitude factor plays a big part. Like, I've been grateful for every day I've spent on set since I was 7 years old as a kid actor, in Australia, and growing up and doing all of that. So I think that when that permeates out, you just can't help but sort of
yeah,
make that be the driving force. And I think having a quiet ambition is
yeah,
terrific. An
absolutely.
overt ambition can be revolting. Not nice to be around.
I think that's really well put. It's not that you don't have a drive. I mean, yeah, I think a quiet ambition is a nice way to put it.
I'm going to say thank you very much. And I want to tell everybody, if you can, after this is done, please go and check out Tip Your Server. It's easy to find on Google. And I think it's a wonderful initiative. You've made me extremely happy being able to be with you for so long, over so many years, and see you grow and develop as a person, as an actor across the course of that show was something that I'll never forget. And I'm going to go out on a prop, Ty, and I want to thank everybody for being here. My mum gave me this. This is no joke, for Christmas.
Ah.
So she knows me better than anyone. So there you go. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. You have been such a positive influence over the past 11 years, and I'm grateful to know you. Thanks, pal.
Thank you.
Thanks. Be safe.